this when you start photography. Nobody warns you about this. And what they don't warn you about when you start photography is that every other photographer is going to make social posts and videos where they repackage basic photography knowledge and try and sell it to you again. And that's, there's an argument to be made. That's what I'm doing. But that's why I don't want to claim to be an expert. I don't want to instruct you. I'm just trying to document my journey as I learn. Do I know more than, the average person? Maybe, I've used manual settings on a camera. I have a good foundation, but I'm not an expert. I just try and make the best pictures I can. But I was scrolling through Instagram and I saw this post that says, nobody warns you about this when you start street photography. And then the caption says, no one explains these parts of shutter speed in street photography. Fast shutter freezes motion, but also cuts light. You need to raise ISO or open the aperture to keep exposure balance. Right off the bat, what are you talking about? Yes, they do. Have you guys ever seen this chart? This is like one of the first things I looked at when I was getting into photography, and this shows you exactly that. Here's shutter speed. 1/1000th of a second, 1/500th of a second, 1/250th, 1/125. And as you lower the shutter speed, as the shutter speed gets slower, your subject gets blurrier in motion, because obviously your shutter is taking longer to cover your frame, cover your sensor, cover your film, whatever you're doing. So objects in motion will blur. And then if you look up top, that's aperture. That explains that if it's wide open, you're going to get more background separation, a shallower depth of field. And as you stop down your aperture, more and more things will be in focus. And then finally on the bottom here, your ISO, your light sensitivity. As you raise the light sensitivity, your picture gets grainier because there's more background radiation and things, and it's just kind of how it works. So shutter speed is fundamental. It is one of the three major things you can do to affect the exposure or affect your image. It's just like, if you're not learning exposure triangle first, then yeah, sure. Like, maybe you don't know that. I'm glad to accept that maybe you don't. Like, this guy doesn't know or didn't know. But what do you mean they don't tell you when you start? That's not really how education works. Like, if you want to get into something, if you're picking up a new hobby, I don't know about you, maybe this is just me. Like, absolutely, you can go out with a camera and just shoot. You could just go auto mode and you're just out there shooting, fix it in post. But like, when I started taking pictures, I was doing lots of research. I'm like, what do I need to know? How do I do this the right way? You learn manual settings, and there are so many situations where, like, having that knowledge where, like, yeah, I could leave it in auto 80-90% of the time because the camera's going to know what's going on. I can fix most things in post. But with a film SLR or other older cameras, like my Bronica, my big medium format camera, I don't have that option. I need to know how everything's working so I can guarantee that the image is going to be good. Or even in some situations, I think I'm going to know better, Let me pull up an example here. So take a look at this photo. I took this a few times, the same scene. 1, 2, 3, 4 looks like. So this is how the camera on auto settings shot it. It raised the ISO to 2500, aperture f2, shutter speed 1/160th. And it obviously wants to capture as much information as it can. And, you know, as a street shot, it's fine. I like the fence in here kind of wrapping us around. I like this kind of cityscape back here. And it's raised the ISO enough that we can kind of see everything. And, you know, these people are, you know, a little underexposed still, but it's all there. But that's not what I wanted. You understand? Like, that's what the camera thinks you want. And, you know, I took it again. I usually just have it like my camera on low burst mode, so I'm like taking doubles just in case. But I mean, you got a good amount of like background detail here, shadow detail, everything looks good. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted this, where we kind of can still see that there are people here if you're looking, but I wanted the subject to be these lights and this kind of city glow over Santa Monica here. You know, there's still stuff in the foreground. We can still see everything. It's just very low and muted. But I just wanted these lights. That's what I was going for. So what did I do? My ISO is only 400. So way lower. My aperture is wide open. My shutter speed is 1/25th, but I was standing still. That's, you know, 1/25th is still pretty good for handheld. You know, there's no noticeable like blur or shake. And even if there was, you know, it's nighttime, it's dark. But I kind of wanted this more moody image where these people are kind of standing in the dark. People are taking pictures of the sunset over the ocean. I like how the cars are kind of highlighted by the light. You get these kind of pools of light in the parking lot as you follow these street lights, and this glow of these lights. And look at this, like right here, these lights in the apartment or whatever this building is. You can see the individual rooms. You almost get a little detail in there. That's still there, but it doesn't pop against this brightened sky. Not to mention, the grain is a lot more noticeable. I mean, it's definitely still there at 400, but it kind of overrides the whole image here. I'm not saying this is a perfect photo by any stretch of the imagination. Like, the composition is fine, but that's a whole other thing. But this is not what I wanted. Like, it looks fine as well. It's gathering a lot more light from behind me that's pooling on the sand here, and I just like, no, I want this. I want this glowing strip. And I think, yeah, for this shot, I did the same thing where I'm like, I just want the lights and look at this faint blue hour glow. And even this one, yeah, I shot the exact same. One, like wide open, get as much light as we can naturally, only 400 ISO, 1/155th, and I just wanted to highlight the lights. If I had shot this like this, it would look totally different, and it's not the mood I was going for. You know, these people gathering on the beach, watching the last of the sun, and then the lights at the pier. Oh, and then this guy looking straight down the lens. I love that. But yeah, I just saw this post, and that was the first thing that got me. Fast shutter freezes motion, but also cuts light. You need to raise the ISO or open the aperture. Yeah, that's the exposure triangle. That's how that works. Slow shutter creates motion blur. Use it to show movement in crowds or passing cars. Okay, yeah. Then it just gets into the stylistic thing. Anything below 1/125th risks blur from camera shake if you shoot handheld. Yeah. Streetlights often flicker at certain shutter speed. Yeah, okay. Yeah, this is kind of helpful hints, you know. LED lights are actually flickering at a certain frequency, and depending on your shutter speed or even your camera's sensor, like that can change things. You know, that can. I've taken pictures with banding before. But you know what? Banding can be a mood as well. Like, ultimately, you're using a tool, and if that tool affects how you see how the image is captured, what are you going to do about it? You know, except for use a different tool, I guess. Longer exposure reveal more background detail. Fast exposures isolate your subject. Yeah, kind of, but also aperture affects that. Shutter speed affects mood as much as sharpness. Fast shots feel tense, slow shots feel calm. I see what you're saying, but you like, it's not really actionable or effective advice. Know your minimum usable shutter speed with your lens. Learn it through practice, not try. Yeah, go out and use a camera. Like, let me be clear. None of this advice on this post is bad or wrong. It's just basic and fundamental. Not, I don't want to say basic to sound like, oh, that's what basic, that's boring. Like, that's good stuff to know, but it's also to say that nobody warns you. Lots of people warn you. Every photography YouTube channel warns you. Every photography instructor warns you. Every photography blog warns you. The exposure triangle, aperture, ISO, and shutter speed, your 4 basic ones, or your 3 basic ones, those are the 3 things that affect your image 100% of the time. That's how, that is the basis of the art of photography. Use those 3 adjustments and create an image. It's so I want to, like, look at me. Here's me. I'm complaining about someone making content about photography online, and in fact I'm making content about me complaining about this guy making content online. I'm sure this person knows what they're doing. I'm sure they've shot a lot more stuff than I have. Looks like they go street shooting, do portraits. Great, good for you. So happy. But like, it's not just them. Like, I'm making content, he's making content. Almost every photographer in the world right now makes content. I mean, there are like photojournalists and stuff that they just let the photos speak for themselves, and that's how they do their work. And I think they're the only ones who are maybe immune from this. I'm sure there's other photographers too. They don't need to advertise. They don't need to make content. And then everybody else is just scrabbling to kind of get noticed and, you know, put stuff out on Instagram. And like, the general consensus right now is that photos on Instagram do not get a bunch of likes. Like, you post a bunch of great photos and nobody likes them. So everybody's struggling to get noticed. So you have to make reels. Reels get more push in the Instagram algorithm, and you can repost them to YouTube and TikTok and get a big audience, and that's great. Everybody wants to get noticed, putting their stuff out there, and you need to have something to say. So you either say, you know, here's me, here's my content, here's what I do, or you have some kind of hook or some kind of draw. There's people who do street portraits. Hunter Creates Things has done a whole great video, 2 videos really, about street photography and the difference between street photography and street portraits, and talking about those TikTok street portrait artists that portray themselves as street photographers, but that's not really what they're doing. But you know, you want to get noticed, you want to demonstrate knowledge and demonstrate value, especially to potential clients. You want to get a lot of clicks so you can get those brand deals, things like that. But it's just, it felt so lazy just coming across that post late last night, and I was like, it just feels so lazy. So I want to end this like on a positive note. I don't think this person is a bad person. I don't want people to go hate thread these people or whatever. They're already getting enough comments that are like, this is basic exposure triangle stuff, this is basic every other YouTuber stuff. So they're fine. Petrichor portraits, no hate, all love. I'm just, the post rubbed me the wrong way, and I think it could be different because I want to hear less about the actual, like, the mechanical. I want to hear less about your settings, and I want to know more about your experience. Does that make sense? You know, there's some other challenges with shutter speed. Like when you're out on the street and you're taking pictures, or even, you know, not on the street necessarily, like in any situation, your shutter button is like a panic button. You know, you see what you want to see and then you're like just smashing the shutter. But if you're trying to do these slow shutter speed, blurry things like you're talking about, then you have to just hold still. You know, you have to be Zen master in that situation, and that can be kind of like a mental whiplash of like switching between like, okay, here I go, looking for the moment, there it is, breathe, take the shot. That's why, you know, the philosophy of F8 and be there is really powerful and really important, because it's less about going and hunting for these things and finding it's sitting and waiting. You know, the nature photographers do it. They just wait in a blind for their subject to do what they want them to do, and you have to be like that in the wild, in society, in a city, in town, wherever you are. The post, in Petrichor Portraits, they talk about learn your minimum shutter speed. Well, your minimum usable shutter speed isn't just about your lens. That can be about you. It could be about how much caffeine you've had, how jittery your hands are. It could be about the wind, how you're breathing. It could be about your shoes. You know, a 50mm lens doesn't have a minimum shutter speed, but you do. Like, what? You have to know yourself to be able to shoot. And that's only learned, like they said, and I like more power to them. In all fairness, they did say, don't learn through charts, just go take shots. That's something I can totally agree with. The exposure triangle chart and that shutter speed chart that I showed, that's a helpful way to understand it and think about it in your head. But being outside and actually taking pictures, that's how you learn. And yeah, they mentioned the flickering lights cause banding. The most interesting cinematic light often comes from artificial sources that flicker. And that's, again, the solution isn't just to test your speeds and see how that banding is reacting. It's to decide if that banding adds something or looks interesting. It's if you're going out into a city and you're looking for kind of like a grungy, or, you know, aesthetic, dirty, I don't know, city aesthetic, maybe that works with that shot, or it ruins it, but that's up to you. And that's the thing where it's like, knowing these technical aspects only gets you so far in taking pictures. You have to, in the end, be an artist and decide, I like that, and that's a good shot. And if nobody, you know, if somebody gets on me about the technical aspects of this, they're wrong, or I don't care, because that's the aesthetic. That's what it looks like. So that's all I wanted to say. It's just like, there's, you know, nobody warns you about a lot of things in photography, but to say that nobody warns you about these simple, not simple, again, fundamental, foundational aspects, that feels a little disingenuous. Nobody warns you about going out and getting over your fear and understanding that there's like an inherent like anxiety to being seen with a camera. You know, you're walking around with a camera, that marks you as somebody that is different from a large portion of society. You are someone who takes pictures with, you know, and people can tell if, you know, they see this camera, they're like, oh, that's a real camera. Like, yeah, you know, you can take a point and shoot, something like this, and people just kind of think you're quirky or whatever. And little do they know, all cameras take pictures, but they see you with like a real camera, quote unquote, they're gonna notice, and you have to be ready to deal with that. That's a big part of, you know, and maybe no one's warned you about that. So if you see something that says, you know, a post that says nobody warns you about this, you know, remember, they're probably not warning you about anything you didn't already know. If you're a photographer, if you've learned, like, I don't want to generalize here. Like, people can warn you about lots of things. There are tons of great Instagram accounts, YouTube channels that are really helpful and have been really foundational to me in learning myself, as you know. And that's part of being an artist, and that's part of being a photographer, and that's part of taking pictures that express something within you. That, because that's ultimately, it's like, we can all look at the same scene and see different things, but what you're taking a picture of and posting, that says something about you. That, you know, there's the subject, there's what it's about, but you took the photo, so you thought that that was important, that particular composition at that time. Maybe you look at it, you're like, I didn't like that composition. Fine, but you still took the picture. You still saw the new term I learned yesterday, the punctum. You know, there's the subject and there's the punctum, which is slightly different, but there was something there that caught you and your artistic eye, and artistic. I'll make sure really clear that up. The real stuff, the hard, messy, creative decisions about shutter speed and ISO and aperture, that's what we should be talking about. That's what we need to learn about ourselves and about our cameras and how we see everything. So thank you for watching. Please consider subscribing, liking, and as of today, only 6 more videos till the end of October.